In a small town nestled in the heart of the Midwest, there lived a little boy who was just 4 years old. His name wasn't important to most people, but his story would soon touch millions. This tiny boy, with big curious eyes and an even bigger imagination, spent most of his days alone. His parents loved him deeply, but they worked long hours to make ends meet. So, while other kids played tag outside or built sandcastles at the park, this little boy often found himself sitting quietly by the window, watching the world go by. One day, as he flipped through an old magazine lying around the house, something caught his attention. It was a colorful spread featuring a man with a warm smile and kind eyes. The article talked about how this man led one of the biggest toy companies in the world. Bright pictures of toys filled the pages: trains, dolls, action figures, and puzzles, all things that made children laugh and dream. But what really stood out to the boy wasn't the toys. It was the man's face. There was something friendly about him, something inviting. The boy tilted his head, thinking hard. He didn't have many friends. Most kids in the neighborhood were older or too busy with their own games to notice him. Even when he tried to join in, he always felt like he didn't quite fit in. Loneliness had become a constant companion for him, though he couldn't put it into words. All he knew was that he wanted someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't ignore him. And somehow, looking at the picture of this man, he felt like maybe, just maybe, this person could understand, with a spark of hope lighting up his young mind. The boy grabbed a piece of construction paper and his box of crayons. He carefully wrote a letter, his small hand gripping the crayon tightly as he formed each shaky letter. "Dear Mr. James," it began. The name came straight from the magazine. He didn't know anything else about the man except that he seemed nice. "I don't have many friends because no one wants to play with me. Do you want to be my friend?" He paused after writing those lines, wondering if he should add more. Then, using every bit of artistic skill a 4-year-old could muster, he drew 2 stick figures holding hands. One figure was labeled Ethan, his name, and the other was labeled James. Satisfied with his work, he folded the paper neatly and slipped it into an envelope. On the front, he scribbled the address he saw in the magazine, adding stars and hearts around the edges for good luck. When his mom came home later that evening, the boy handed her the envelope shyly. "Can you send this for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately, and promised she'd take care of it. Little did either of them know, this simple act would set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, inside a sleek office building in the middle of a bustling city, sat the very man whose picture had inspired the boy. James Carter was known for being one of the most successful CEOs in the business world. Under his leadership, Playtime Inc. had grown into a global powerhouse, producing some of the most beloved toys on the market. Yet despite his achievements, James wasn't your typical corporate leader. He had a reputation for being approachable, down-to-earth, and genuinely interested in the well-being of others. Employees admired him not only for his sharp mind, but also for his big heart. Every morning, as part of his routine, James reviewed a stack of letters sent to the company by customers. Some praised the quality of the products, others requested refunds, and a few contained creative ideas for new toys. That particular day, however, one envelope stood out among the rest. Its handmade appearance immediately caught his eye. There were colorful doodles decorating the corners, and the return address was written in uneven block letters. Curious, James opened it and pulled out the piece of construction paper inside. As he read the words scrawled across the page, his expression softened. By the time he reached the end, tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. Here was a child, a real, living, breathing child who felt so isolated that he had reached out to a complete stranger for companionship. The simplicity of the request struck James deeply. It wasn't asking for money, fame, or even toys. It was asking for something far more valuable: friendship. Unable to contain his emotions, James called his assistant into the room. "Listen to this," he said, clearing his throat before reading the letter aloud. When he finished, there was silence. His assistant blinked back tears, unsure of what to say. Finally, she managed, "What are you going to do?" James leaned back in his chair, staring thoughtfully at the ceiling. "We're going to do something special for this kid," he replied firmly. "But not just for him, for every child who feels the way he does." Over the next few days, James couldn't stop thinking about the letter. Images of the stick figures holding hands kept flashing in his mind, along with the haunting question, "Do you want to be my friend?" These weren't the kinds of questions he usually dealt with in board meetings or strategy sessions. They were raw, honest, and deeply human. And they demanded a response. He realized that this wasn't just about answering a letter. It was about addressing a much larger issue, one that affected countless children all over the world. Loneliness wasn't unique to Ethan. It was a silent epidemic affecting kids of all ages, backgrounds, and circumstances. Whether it stemmed from busy parents, social anxiety, or simply feeling different, the pain of isolation was universal. If James could use his position and resources to help, then he had a responsibility to try. With renewed determination, James gathered his team for an emergency brainstorming session. "This isn't just about Ethan anymore," he told them. "It's about creating a movement, a way to connect kids who feel invisible and remind them that they matter." Together, they came up with a bold plan. First, James would personally visit the boy who had written the letter. Second, they would launch a nationwide initiative called Buddy Boxes, designed to bring children together through pen pal exchanges and shared experiences. Preparations began immediately. James arranged for a trip to the boy's hometown, ensuring everything would be low-key and personal. No fanfare, no press conferences, just a genuine effort to form a connection. At the same time, his marketing team worked tirelessly to promote the Buddy Box program, spreading the word through social media, schools, and community organizations. By the time James arrived in the small Midwestern town, news of his visit had already leaked. Local reporters lined the streets, eager to capture the moment when a billionaire CEO stepped out of his car to meet a lonely child. But none of that mattered to James. As he walked up to the modest house where the boy lived, his focus was entirely on the task ahead, making a scared, hopeful little boy feel seen and valued. And standing in the doorway, clutching a stuffed bear and staring wide-eyed at the towering figure before him, was Ethan, the boy who had dared to ask for friendship. When James stepped out of his car in that quiet little town, the scene was nothing short of surreal. Cameras clicked furiously and neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering to each other about the unexpected visitor. But none of that mattered to James. His focus wasn't on the reporters or the growing crowd. It was on the small boy standing nervously in the doorway of a modest house. The boy's wide eyes were fixed on him, filled with a mix of awe and uncertainty. James took a deep breath before walking toward the house. He didn't want to overwhelm the child. Instead of striding confidently like he usually did during business meetings, he slowed his pace, making sure every step felt calm and deliberate. As he approached, he crouched down slightly, lowering himself to the boy's level. With a warm smile, he said softly, "Hi there, I'm James. You wrote me a letter, right?" The boy nodded but didn't say anything. He clutched his stuffed bear tightly against his chest, as if it were a shield protecting him from the world. James noticed how tiny the boy looked, how fragile, and it tugged at his heartstrings. This wasn't just a photo opportunity or a PR stunt for him. It was personal now. He had read the letter over and over again, and each time, it reminded him of how vulnerable children could be when they felt unseen. "Well," James continued, gently, "I got your letter, and I thought about it a lot. And guess what? I'd love to be your friend." At those words, the boy's grip on the bear loosened just a little. A flicker of hope crossed his face, though he still seemed unsure. To ease the tension, James reached into his bag and pulled out a brightly colored action figure. "I brought you something," he said, holding it out. "It's one of our newest toys. Do you think we can play with it together?" For a moment, the boy hesitated. Then, slowly, he extended his hand and took the toy. His fingers brushed against James's, and in that brief touch, something shifted. It was as if the boy realized this man wasn't here to judge him or make him feel small. He was here because he genuinely cared. "Come on," James said, standing up and gesturing toward the backyard. "Let's go play." As they moved outside, the cameras followed, capturing every interaction. But neither James nor the boy paid attention to them. They sat down on the grass, surrounded by scattered toys and blocks. At first, the boy stayed quiet, watching James intently as he started building a tower with colorful bricks. James didn't rush him. He simply kept talking, sharing stories about his own childhood, and how much he loved playing with trains and puzzles when he was younger. "I used to build towers like this all the time," James said, stacking another block. "But my little sister would always knock them down before I could finish. She thought it was hilarious." The boy giggled softly, the sound almost musical. Encouraged, James handed him a block. "Here, why don't you try adding one?" Hesitant. At first, the boy reached out and placed the block carefully on top of the tower. When it stayed upright, his face lit up with pride. For the first time that day, he spoke. "Can we build it taller?" he asked shyly. "Of course," James replied enthusiastically. "Let's see how high we can go." And just like that, the ice broke. Over the next hour, the two laughed and played together, their connection growing stronger with each passing moment. The boy forgot about the cameras and the strangers watching. All that mattered was the man sitting beside him, treating him not as a CEO or a celebrity, but as a friend. Later that afternoon, James suggested they write letters together. "You know," he explained, "there are lots of kids out there who might feel lonely too. Maybe we can help them find friends by writing to them." The boy tilted his head curiously. "Like me?" "Exactly like you," James confirmed. "Would you like to do that?" Eyes shining with excitement, the boy nodded eagerly. Together they sat at a small table, penning notes to children across the country who had signed up for the Buddy Box program. Each letter was simple yet heartfelt, filled with drawings and encouraging words. Watching the boy scribble away, James felt a lump form in his throat. This was exactly why he had come, not just to meet one child, but to remind himself and everyone else of the importance of human connection. By the end of the day, the boy was beaming. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, he tugged on James's sleeve. "Will you come back?" he asked timidly. James smiled, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "I promise I'll stay in touch, and I'll visit whenever I can." With those words, the boy hugged him tightly, burying his face in James's jacket. It was a hug born out of gratitude, trust, and newfound hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, he went to bed that night feeling seen and loved. Meanwhile, footage of their meeting spread like wildfire online. People everywhere watched videos of the playful afternoon, marveling at the genuine bond between the billionaire CEO and the shy 4-year-old. Social media platforms buzzed with comments praising James's kindness and empathy. Parents shared stories of their own children struggling with loneliness, while teachers expressed interest in joining the Buddy Box initiative. The hashtag BSOMEO's friend quickly trended worldwide, sparking conversations about mental health, isolation, and the power of compassion. News outlets covered the story extensively, highlighting not only the emotional impact of the visit, but also the broader implications of the Buddy Box program. Experts weighed in, discussing how initiatives like these could help combat childhood loneliness on a larger scale. Even celebrities joined the conversation, using their platforms to amplify the message. But perhaps the most touching reactions came from ordinary people, young and old, who were inspired to reach out to someone in their own lives. From handwritten notes to phone calls and even random acts of kindness, communities began coming together in ways they hadn't before. What started as a single letter written by a lonely child had grown into something far greater, a movement rooted in love, understanding, and humanity. As James drove away from the town that evening, he glanced at the passenger seat where the boy's drawing of two stick figures holding hands lay. He couldn't help but smile. In that moment, he realized that true success wasn't measured by profits or accolades. It was measured by the lives you touched and the connections you made along the way. The next morning, the story of James's visit to the small town was everywhere. News channels played clips of him building towers with the boy, laughing as they wrote letters together and sharing quiet moments on the grass. Social media feeds were flooded with photos of the two stick figure drawings. Hashtags like #BSOMEONES and heartfelt messages from people who had been moved by what they saw. It wasn't just a feel-good story, it was a wake-up call for many. Parents posted about their own kids, talking openly about how hard it was for some children to make friends or fit in. Teachers shared stories of students sitting alone at lunch or struggling to connect with classmates. Even adults chimed in, admitting that they too sometimes felt invisible in their busy lives. The response was overwhelming, but James wasn't surprised. He knew loneliness didn't discriminate. It affected everyone, no matter their age or background. And now, thanks to one little boy's courage, millions of people were starting to talk about it back at Playtime Inc. The team worked around the clock to keep up with the growing demand for the Buddy Box program. Schools, libraries, and community centers across the country began signing up, eager to participate. Kids started writing letters to each other, sharing bits of their lives, what they liked to do for fun, their favorite foods, and even their dreams for the future. Some included drawings, stickers, or small handmade crafts. Every package became a bridge between two strangers, bringing them closer despite the miles between them. For the boy who had written the original letter, life changed in ways he never expected. Suddenly, he wasn't just a shy kid living in a quiet town, he was part of something bigger. Letters poured in from all over the place, addressed specifically to him. Some came from kids his own age, while others were from older children who wanted to encourage him. Each envelope carried a message of kindness, reminding him that he mattered. One letter stood out among the rest. It was from a girl who said she understood how lonely he must have felt because she often felt the same way. She wrote about how she loved reading books and drawing pictures, and she hoped they could become pen pals. Enclosed in the envelope was a colorful bookmark she had made herself, decorated with stars and flowers. When the boy read her words, his eyes lit up. For the first time, he realized he wasn't alone, not really. There were others like him, and they wanted to be his friend. James stayed true to his promise, staying in touch with the boy regularly. He called him every week to check in, asking about school, his new pen pals, and how he was feeling. Sometimes he'd send surprise packages filled with toys, puzzles, or art supplies. But more than anything, he listened. He let the boy talk about whatever was on his mind, whether it was his favorite cartoon or the time he fell off his bike and scraped his knee. These conversations weren't just casual chats, they were lifelines, helping the boy build confidence and trust. As months passed, the boy began to change. The shyness that once defined him started to fade. He became more comfortable speaking up, both at home and in school. His mom noticed at first how he would excitedly tell her about a new letter he received or show her a picture he drew for one of his pen pals. Then his teacher saw it too. During class activities, he raised his hand more often and even volunteered to lead a group project. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, allowing him to finally shine. Meanwhile, James continued expanding the Buddy Box initiative, turning it into a nationwide campaign. Partnering with schools and nonprofit organizations, he ensured that every child who wanted to participate could do so, regardless of their circumstances. Boxes were distributed free of charge, filled not only with stationery and stamps, but also with resources for parents and educators on how to support children dealing with loneliness. The program quickly gained traction, earning praise from mental health advocates and community leaders alike. But James didn't stop there. He wanted to create lasting change, so he launched a foundation dedicated to addressing childhood loneliness. Funds raised through donations and partnerships supported after-school programs, mentorship opportunities, and events designed to bring kids together. Celebrities, influencers, and everyday people rallied behind the cause, using their platforms to spread awareness. From local bake sales to charity concerts, communities came together to raise money and celebrate the power of connection. The impact was undeniable. Teachers reported seeing quieter students open up and form friendships they never thought possible. Parents marveled at the newfound confidence in their kids, who were now excited to share stories about their pen pals or attend social events without hesitation. Even adults found inspiration in the movement, reaching out to old friends or neighbors they hadn't spoken to in years. What started as a single act of kindness had grown into a ripple effect, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. Through it all, James remained humble. In interviews, he often credited the boy for sparking the movement. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest truths, he would say, his voice tinged with emotion. This wasn't my idea, it was his. All I did was listen. And listen he did. Whether it was answering questions during press conferences or visiting schools to talk about the importance of friendship, James always brought the focus back to the children. He encouraged them to speak up, to ask for help when they needed it, and to be kind to one another. His message was simple yet powerful. Everyone deserves to feel seen and loved. By the end of the year, millions of children had participated in the Buddy Box program. Countless friendships had blossomed, and countless lives had been transformed. The movement had gone global, with countries around the world adopting similar initiatives. Yet for all its success, James knew the work was far from over. Loneliness was still a challenge faced by many, and he was determined to keep fighting for those who felt invisible, for the boy who had started it all. The journey was just beginning. With each passing day, he grew more confident, more compassionate, and more eager to help others. Inspired by James's example, he dreamed of one day doing something big himself, something that would make the world a better place. Little did he know, he already had. As the years rolled on, the boy who had once written that heartfelt letter grew into a bright and confident teenager. The shy, quiet child who used to sit alone by the window was now unrecognizable. He still carried the same warmth and kindness in his eyes, but there was something new, a spark of purpose. He had learned early on that reaching out for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was an act of courage. And because someone had listened to him when he needed it most, he wanted to pay it forward. The Buddy Box program, which had started as a simple idea born out of loneliness, had grown into a global phenomenon. Millions of kids were exchanging letters, drawings, and small gifts through the initiative. It wasn't just about making friends anymore. It was about creating a sense of belonging. Children from different corners of the world were finding common ground despite their differences. A boy in India might bond with a girl in Canada over their shared love of soccer, while another pair discovered they both dreamed of becoming astronauts. Someday, these connections weren't just fleeting, they were meaningful, lasting, and transformative for the teenager. Being part of this movement felt like coming full circle. He became one of its most passionate advocates, volunteering his time to mentor younger kids who were struggling with loneliness. At community events and school assemblies, he'd stand up and share his story, the story of how he wrote a letter to a stranger and ended up inspiring millions. His message was always the same: if you're feeling lonely, don't keep it inside. Reach out. Someone will care. Parents and teachers often remarked on how much he had grown, not just in confidence, but in empathy. He seemed to understand people in a way that many adults struggled to grasp. When he spoke to kids who felt invisible, he didn't offer generic advice or platitudes. Instead, he listened, really listened, the way James had done for him all those years ago. He told them it was okay to feel what they were feeling and reminded them that everyone deserved to be seen and valued. By the time he finished speaking, even the quietest kids in the room would raise their hands to ask questions or share their own stories. James, too, had undergone a transformation. Running one of the largest toy companies in the world no longer felt like just a job, it was a mission. Every decision he made was guided by the belief that businesses could and should do more than chase profits. Under his leadership, Playtime Inc. became synonymous with compassion and innovation. The company launched entire product lines designed to foster creativity, teamwork, and emotional intelligence in children. From cooperative board games to building sets that encourage storytelling, Each item was crafted with care and intention, but perhaps the most significant shift was in James's perspective on success. Before meeting the boy, he measured achievement by number, sales figures, market shares, and quarterly reports. Now he saw success differently. It wasn't about how much money the company made or how many awards it won. It was about impact. How many lives had been touched? How many smiles had been sparked? How many hearts had been healed? To ensure the foundation he had started continued to thrive, James worked tirelessly to secure partnerships with schools, nonprofits, and governments. Together, they expanded the Buddy Box program beyond pen pal exchanges. They organized weekend camps where kids could meet their pen pals in person, hosted art contests celebrating friendship, and even created online platforms where children could connect safely in the digital age. Every initiative was rooted in the same core principle: no child should ever feel alone. The media continued to follow the story closely, documenting the ripple effects of the movement. Documentaries were made, books were written, and podcasts featured interviews with families whose lives had been changed. One particularly moving segment aired on a popular morning show, featuring a mother whose son had battled severe social anxiety. She tearfully recounted how the Buddy Box program had given him the confidence to step outside his shell and make friends for the first time. Another episode highlighted a classroom in a low-income neighborhood, where students credited the program with helping them overcome bullying and build stronger bonds with each other. Despite the widespread recognition, James never sought the spotlight for himself. Whenever reporters asked him about his role in the movement, he redirected the conversation to the children. "This isn't my story," he'd say with a smile. "It belongs to every kid who found a friend, every parent who saw their child come alive, and every teacher who witnessed the power of connection in action. I'm just grateful to have played a small part in it." Even as the years passed and the initial buzz around the story began to fade, the impact lingered. Schools incorporated lessons on empathy and kindness into their curriculums. Parents started having open conversations with their kids about mental health and loneliness. Communities rallied around initiatives that brought people together, whether it was organizing neighborhood block parties or setting up free playdates at local parks. What had begun as a single letter had evolved into a cultural shift to collective understanding that we are all responsible for looking out for one another. For the teenager, the bond he shared with James remained as strong as ever. Though their paths diverged over time, they stayed in touch, meeting regularly to reflect on their journey. James often joked that the boy had taught him more than he could ever repay. "You reminded me why we do what we do," he'd say during their catch-up calls. "You showed me that sometimes the smallest gestures can change the world." And the boy? Well, he carried that lesson with him wherever he went. As he prepared to graduate high school and step into adulthood, he knew exactly what he wanted to do next. Inspired by James's example, he planned to study psychology so he could dedicate his life to helping others navigate feelings of loneliness and isolation. He envisioned a future where no child would ever feel the way he once did, lost, unseen, and unsure if anyone cared. By then, the Buddy Box program had reached tens of millions of children worldwide. Countless friendships had blossomed, and countless lives had been transformed. But for the teenager in James, the true measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the stories, the handwritten notes tucked inside colorful envelopes, the laughter echoing through campgrounds, the hugs exchanged between pen pals meeting for the first time. Those moments, fleeting yet profound, were proof that love and kindness could bridge any gap. Looking back, neither of them could have predicted how far their journey would take them. What started as a simple plea for friendship had grown into a legacy of compassion, resilience, and hope. And though the world kept changing, one thing remained constant: the belief that everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, deserves to feel seen, heard, and loved. Years turned into decades, and the boy who had once written that heartfelt letter grew into a man. He wasn't just any man, he was someone who carried with him a deep sense of purpose. The lessons he had learned as a child stayed with him throughout his life, shaping the way he saw the world and interacted with others. Those early days of loneliness had taught him something invaluable. No one should have to face the world alone. By the time he reached adulthood, he had become a psychologist specializing in childhood development. His work focused on helping kids navigate feelings of isolation and anxiety. He often found himself sitting across from young patients, listening intently as they poured out their fears and frustrations. Many reminded him of his younger self, quiet, unsure, and desperate for connection. When they asked how he knew exactly what they were going through, he'd smile softly and say, "Because I've been there too." He never stopped advocating for the Buddy Box program, which by now had evolved far beyond its original form. It wasn't just about exchanging letters anymore. It was a global network connecting children in meaningful ways. Pen pal relationships still thrived, but new initiatives had been added over the years. Virtual meets allowed kids from different countries to chat face-to-face using translation software. Art workshops encouraged creativity while fostering friendships. And summer camps brought together children from diverse backgrounds, giving them a chance to bond over shared experiences like hiking, storytelling, and stargazing. The foundation James had started continued to thrive under his leadership, long after he retired from running Playtime Inc. Though he handed over the reins of the company to younger executives, he remained deeply involved in the movement. Now an older man with silver hair and laugh lines etched around his eyes, James traveled the world speaking at conferences, schools, and community events. His message was always the same: loneliness is not something we can ignore. It's not just a personal struggle, it's a societal issue, and it's up to all of us to fix it. James and the boy-turned-man stayed close friends throughout their lives, meeting regularly to reflect on how far they'd come. During these visits, they'd sit together, sipping coffee or tea, reminiscing about the day they first met. They laughed about how nervous the boy had been when James stepped out of the car, clutching his stuffed bear. They talked about the countless letters they'd both received since then, each filled with gratitude and hope. And they marveled at how something so small, a single act of courage, had sparked a movement that touched millions one evening. As they sat on a porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, James turned to the man and said, I think about that letter you wrote all the time. Not because it changed your life, but because it changed mine." The man smiled, leaning back in his chair. "Funny, isn't it? Sometimes the smallest things make the biggest difference." They sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. Then James chuckled. "Do you remember that first tower we built together, the one made of blocks?" "Of course," the man replied, grinning. "It fell down 5 times before we finally got it right. And even then it wobbled," James added with a laugh. "But we didn't give up. No, we didn't," the man agreed. "And look where we are now." Indeed, the legacy they had built together stood tall, stronger than ever. The Buddy Box program had connected tens of millions of children worldwide, creating friendships that transcended borders, cultures, and languages. Schools incorporated lessons on empathy and kindness into their curriculums. Parents openly discussed mental health with their kids, teaching them to recognize and address feelings of loneliness. Communities rallied around initiatives designed to bring people together, whether it was organizing neighborhood block parties or setting up free playdates at local parks. But perhaps the most profound impact was felt on an individual level. Countless stories emerged over the years, each one a testament to the power of human connection. There was the shy girl in Australia who discovered her love for writing through pen pal exchanges and went on to publish her own book, The Boy In. Brazil, whose confidence soared after attending a Buddy Box camp and making lifelong friends. The teenager in Canada who credited the program with helping him overcome bullying and find his voice. Even adults weren't immune to the ripple effects. Inspired by the movement, many reconnected with old friends, reached out to estranged family members, or volunteered their time to mentor lonely kids in their communities. Social media campaigns encouraged random acts of kindness, reminding people that even the smallest gestures could brighten someone's day. From handwritten notes left on windshields to strangers buying coffee for the person behind them in line, The spirit of compassion spread far and wide. For James, the journey reinforced everything he believed about humanity. Despite the challenges, the world faced wars, pandemics, economic struggles. He saw proof every day that people were inherently good. They wanted to help each other, to lift each other up. All they needed was a little nudge, a reminder that their actions mattered. As for the man, he carried the lessons of his childhood into every aspect of his life. Whether he was counseling a troubled teen, speaking at a conference, or simply having dinner with his own family, he approached every interaction with kindness and understanding. He often thought about the boy he used to be, the one who felt invisible, and thanked the universe for sending him James. Without that unexpected friendship, he might never have realized his potential. Years later, when James passed away peacefully, in his sleep, tributes poured in from around the globe. News outlets ran headlines calling him a visionary and a force for good. But to those who knew him best, he was simply Jamesy, a kind, humble man who believed in the power of connection. At his memorial service, the man delivered a eulogy that brought tears to everyone's eyes. He taught me that friendship isn't just about sharing laughs or memories. He said, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. It's about showing up when someone needs you. It's about listening, really listening to what they're saying, even if they don't use words. And it's about reminding them over and over again that they matter. The audience erupted in applause, but the man didn't stay for long. Afterward, he slipped away quietly, heading to a nearby park where he and James had often walked together. Sitting on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree, he pulled out an envelope from his pocket. Inside was a faded piece of construction paper covered in crayon scribbles and stick figures holding hands. It was the original letter he had written all those years ago. Tears blurred his vision as he traced the shaky handwriting with his fingers. "Thank you," he whispered to the empty air, knowing James would hear him wherever he was. "Thank you for believing in me." In the end, their story wasn't just about a boy and a CEO. It was about the transformative power of kindness, the importance of reaching out, and the incredible things that happen when we choose to see each other not as strangers, but as fellow humans deserving of love and compassion. Their journey reminded the world of a timeless truth. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for a friend. And sometimes the simplest response can change everything.